Todd and Rachel Winkler seemed like the perfect couple, but behind closed doors, a dark secret festered. A secret that would shatter their family and leave a quiet neighborhood haunted forever. Todd Winkler was the kind of man who seemed to have it all. His life appeared flawless from the outside, a carefully crafted image that few could question. A former Air Force pilot, Todd had a reputation for discipline and precision. After his military service, he transitioned into the pharmaceutical industry, where he climbed the corporate ladder with apparent ease. Colleagues admired his sharp mind and steady leadership. At home, he was a devoted husband to Rachel and a loving father to their 2 children. Their house in Cameron Park was a picture of suburban perfection, a tidy lawn, a well-maintained garden, and a peaceful street where neighbors exchanged friendly greetings. People who knew Todd and Rachel believed their marriage was solid. Rachel was known as a warm, organized woman who managed the household with care. She was the one who organized school events and community activities, always present with a smile. Friends envied their relationship, seeing it as a model of stability and happiness. But beneath the surface, cracks were forming that no one else could see. In the months before the tragedy, Rachel began to change. She became more reserved and anxious. Close friends noticed her withdrawing from social gatherings, her laughter less frequent. She confided in a trusted neighbor that she felt uneasy around Todd, that something wasn't right. She mentioned strange behaviors, secretive phone calls late at night, sudden absences from home, and a growing obsession with weapons that didn't fit with the man she knew. Rachel's unease grew until she began documenting her fears in a private journal. The pages revealed a woman grappling with doubt and suspicion. She wrote about arguments that escalated quickly, about Todd's moods shifting unpredictably. She mentioned money disappearing from their accounts, unexplained withdrawals that she hadn't authorized. More disturbingly, she described nights when Todd stayed awake for hours, pacing the house, talking to himself, his eyes distant and cold. Despite her growing fear, Rachel kept her concerns to herself publicly. She didn't want to alarm their children or cause a scandal. But her private writings showed her mind racing, planning for a way out. She began to consider leaving Todd, thinking about taking the children and starting over somewhere new. Her journal entries became increasingly urgent and desperate, as if she sensed danger closing in. On the morning of February 27th, Rachel's journal ended abruptly. The last entry was incomplete, trailing off mid-sentence. That same day, neighbors were shocked to hear sirens blaring outside the Winkler home. Police and paramedics arrived to a scene that would haunt the community for years. Rachel Winkler had been found dead in the master bedroom, her body battered and stained with blood. The weapon was a ceremonial sword, an object that seemed out of place in a quiet suburban home, but was covered in blood. Todd was the one who called 911. When officers found him, he appeared calm, but oddly detached from the horror unfolding around him. His explanation was simple. Rachel had attacked him during a fight, and he had acted in self-defense. But his story didn't match the brutality of the scene. As investigators began piecing together the events, it became clear this was no ordinary domestic dispute. The perfect image of Todd Winkler was starting to crack, revealing something far more complex and far more dangerous beneath. What had once looked like a happy family was now a scene of violence and mystery. The truth behind the 2 faces of Todd Winkler was about to unravel, exposing secrets that no one expected. When the police arrived at the Winkler residence, the atmosphere inside the house was heavy and unsettling. The silence was broken only by the steady beep of medical equipment, and the faint, distant cries of the Winkler children, who remained asleep in their rooms, unaware of the tragedy unfolding nearby. The scene in the master bedroom was shocking, a brutal act of violence that seemed almost impossible in such a peaceful neighborhood. Rachel Winkler lay motionless on the floor, her body showing signs of a savage attack. The weapon used was unlike anything the investigators had encountered in a typical domestic crime scene. A long ceremonial sword, its blade stained dark with blood. Detectives moved carefully, documenting every detail. The room showed signs of struggle, but oddly it wasn't overturned in chaos. Objects were mostly undisturbed, aside from the immediate area around Rachel's body. The investigators noted the deep wounds that covered her torso and arms, the kind of injuries that suggested the attacker knew exactly how to inflict maximum harm. There were defensive wounds on Rachel's hands and forearms, indicating she had tried desperately to protect herself. Todd Winkler was found nearby, his calm demeanor strange given the violent scene. He claimed Rachel had attacked him first during a heated argument. According to his version, he had no choice but to defend himself, resulting in the tragic death of his wife. Yet, the injuries on Todd's face were minor. A few scratches and bruises, nothing to match the intensity of the assault on Rachel. Police began to suspect that Todd's story didn't fully explain what happened. Inside the house, detectives searched for clues. In the master bedroom closet, they discovered Rachel's hidden journal, a secret record of her fears and suspicions. The journal painted a disturbing picture of a woman living in growing terror, writing of late-night arguments, unexplained absences, and her increasing mistrust of Todd. The last entries were especially troubling, filled with plans to leave him and protect her children from what she described as something dark. Financial records added another layer to the investigation. Large sums of money had been withdrawn from the Winklers' joint account in the weeks before the attack. These transactions were all made by Todd and were never explained. Moreover, investigators uncovered that Todd had recently taken out a hefty life insurance policy on Rachel, worth nearly $2 million, a detail that raised questions about motive. No signs of forced entry were found, indicating the attacker was someone Rachel knew and trusted enough to let inside. The children were unharmed and unaware of the violence that had taken place in their home. Everything pointed back to Todd. Forensic experts carefully examined the sword used in the murder. It was not a common household item, but rather a ceremonial piece, likely acquired for display or collection. The way it was used in the attack suggested a cold, calculated intent. The wounds were precise, made by someone who was both physically capable and emotionally detached. The investigation deepened as detectives learned more about Todd's past. His military background explained his physical strength and familiarity with weapons, but also hinted at a side of him that few had seen before, a side that was disciplined but potentially dangerous when pushed. Todd was officially named the prime suspect. The calm exterior he had shown upon the police's arrival began to crack under scrutiny. The truth behind the night of Rachel's death seemed far darker than anyone had imagined. The investigation was only just beginning. The quiet neighborhood of Cameron Park was left stunned as neighbors struggled to reconcile the image of Todd Winkler, the respected veteran and family man. With the horror uncovered inside his home, as investigators peeled back the layers of Todd Winkler's life, a far more complex and troubling portrait began to emerge. The man who had been seen as a disciplined Air Force pilot and successful executive revealed himself to be someone with a hidden past and a disturbing double life. Colleagues from his former pharmaceutical company described Todd as highly intelligent but manipulative, a man who could charm and deceive with ease. Behind the polished smile was someone who bent rules and cut corners to get what he wanted. Years earlier, Todd had been quietly investigated for allegedly stealing sensitive data from a rival company. Though no charges were filed, the incident raised red flags about his ethics and character. Further examination of Todd's finances uncovered a trail of secrets. For months leading up to Rachel's death, large amounts of cash had been withdrawn from their joint bank account. These transactions were carefully hidden and left no clear explanation. Financial experts involved in the investigation suggested these could have been used to fund an escape plan, or worse, to pay for something sinister. On top of this, the discovery of the expensive life insurance policy Todd had taken out on Rachel added a chilling dimension. Nearly $2 million were at stake, and Todd was the sole beneficiary. Medical and psychological experts brought forward reports that painted Todd in a far different light than the public knew. He exhibited traits consistent with narcissistic personality disorder, including a lack of empathy, grandiosity, and a need for control. Some suggested he displayed early signs of delusional thinking, particularly when it came to how he viewed his family and his own importance. His military background, while lending him discipline and focus, also contributed to a cold and calculated demeanor, capable of detachment even in high-stress situations. The prosecution's case began to take shape as a story of calculated murder. Rather than a moment of passion or a fight gone wrong, they argued that Todd had carefully planned the killing. The ceremonial sword was not a random weapon, but something Todd had acquired deliberately, possibly to avoid using a typical firearm and raising less suspicion. Evidence showed Todd had researched how to use such a weapon days before the murder. This contradicted any claim that the attack was spontaneous or purely defensive. Meanwhile, The defense tried to portray Rachel as mentally unstable and aggressive, arguing Todd acted to protect himself and their children from a violent outburst. But this narrative didn't hold under the weight of forensic evidence in Rachel's detailed journal. Her notes made it clear she was the one living in fear, planning her escape from a man who was slipping into dangerous territory. Neighbors and friends who once admired Todd began to question how well they really knew him. Stories surfaced of sudden mood swings and moments of intense anger that had been hidden behind his calm exterior. The man who had once been a respected pilot and businessman was now seen as someone capable of cruelty and deception. The police investigation revealed a chilling truth. Todd Winkler had two faces, one that charmed and reassured the world, and another that harbored secrets, rage, and a capacity for violence. The man behind the mask was no longer just a suspect. He was the central figure in a story of betrayal, greed, and murder. As the evidence mounted, it became clear this was not a case of accidental death, but a cold, calculated act that shattered the illusion of the perfect family. The trial of Todd Winkler quickly became one of the most closely watched cases in the region, drawing attention from media, neighbors, and even strangers intrigued by the chilling story. Courtroom seats filled with reporters and curious onlookers eager to hear the truth behind the man who had once been admired as a war hero and successful businessman. The prosecution worked tirelessly to present a case that would convince the jury Todd's actions were deliberate and calculated, not the result of a sudden argument or panic. Throughout the proceedings, prosecutors painted a grim portrait of Todd as a man living a double life, one filled with deception and hidden motives. They laid out a detailed timeline showing Todd's growing obsession with control and power. Evidence of his financial manipulation was key. Millions had been siphoned from company accounts. Large cash withdrawals were unexplained, and the life insurance policy on Rachel was presented as a clear motive. They highlighted Todd's research into the use of the sword found at the crime scene, showing that he had planned the attack well in advance. The medical examiner's testimony struck a chord with the jury. The extensive wounds on Rachel's body, the defensive marks on her hands, and the lack of serious injuries on Todd all contradicted his self-defense claim. The prosecution argued that Todd had attacked Rachel methodically, knowing exactly how to overpower her. They emphasized the cold brutality of the crime and the way Todd tried to mask it as an accident or a defensive act. The defense team, meanwhile, attempted to introduce doubt. They argued that Rachel had a history of emotional instability, pointing to moments when she had been described as erratic and aggressive. They suggested that Todd had been forced to act in the moment to protect himself and the children. However, the defense struggled to counter the overwhelming evidence found in Rachel's private journal, which clearly depicted Todd as the source of fear and danger in the household. One of the most dramatic moments of the trial came when digital forensic experts revealed Todd's internet search history. Days before Rachel's death, Todd had searched for instructions on how to kill someone with a sword, a chilling detail that shocked the courtroom. The revelation was a turning point, effectively crushing the defense's argument of spontaneity or self-defense. It confirmed the prosecution's narrative of premeditation. Witnesses who had once admired Todd appeared on the stand, some reluctantly. They testified about sudden changes in his behavior, describing mood swings and moments of unexplained anger. Friends and former colleagues painted a picture of a man whose charm masked a darker personality beneath. These accounts helped jurors see Todd as more than just a grieving husband. He was a calculating man with dangerous secrets. After weeks of testimony, the trial reached its conclusion. The jury deliberated for several days before returning with a verdict. Todd Winkler was guilty of first-degree murder. The courtroom fell silent as the judge handed down the sentence: life in prison without the possibility of parole. Todd showed no visible emotion, his face stoic, as the verdict was read aloud. The case left a lasting impact on the community. It was a stark reminder of how appearances can deceive, how a man once revered could harbor secrets so dark they led to murder. For the Winkler family, justice had been served, but the scars left behind were deep and painful. The trial of Todd Winkler closed a chapter of horror and betrayal, but opened a conversation about trust, truth, and the dangers hiding behind the masks people wear. Years after the verdict, Todd Winkler remains behind bars, a man whose name still stirs unease in Cameron Park and beyond. Despite the overwhelming evidence against him, Todd has never admitted guilt. Throughout his time in prison, he has maintained his innocence, insisting that he acted only to defend himself and protect his family. His repeated appeals have failed to overturn the conviction, and the courts have upheld the decision. Leaving Todd to live out his days isolated from the world he once controlled, the story of Todd Winkler became more than just a headline. It evolved into a chilling lesson about appearances and the masks people wear. To the outside world, Todd had been the embodiment of success, a respected veteran and family man. But beneath that carefully constructed facade lay a dangerous man, consumed by control, greed, and dark delusions. His ability to compartmentalize these two faces, the public hero and the private tormentor, allowed him to fool those around him for years. Rachel Winkler's voice lives on through the journal she kept in the final months of her life. Her writings were a cry for help, a detailed record of fear and desperation that helped unravel the truth. They serve as a haunting reminder of what can happen when someone eases instincts to protect themselves and their loved ones are ignored or dismissed. Her courage in documenting her reality helped bring justice in a case where facts could have easily been obscured. In the community, the impact of the case lingers. Neighbors who once exchanged smiles in passing now look at each other with a mixture of sadness and disbelief, struggling to reconcile the image of a peaceful family with the brutal crime that shattered their quiet street. The Winkler children, once surrounded by warmth and safety, faced a future forever marked by loss and confusion. The trial and conviction also sparked conversations about the dangers of hidden abuse and the importance of listening to those who may be suffering in silence. Experts in psychology and law enforcement have since used the case to train officers and counselors on recognizing warning signs in domestic situations that might otherwise go unnoticed. Todd Winkler's name will forever be linked to a story of betrayal, greed, and violence. His double life is a stark example of how appearances can deceive, and how evil can sometimes hide behind the most familiar faces. The quiet streets of Cameron Park carry the memory of a family destroyed, but also the hope that truth and justice, no matter how delayed, can prevail. In the end, the story of Todd Winkler reminds us all to look deeper, to question what lies beneath the surface, and to never ignore the warning signs when someone cries out for help, even if their voice is written in silence. It is a dark tale, but one that urges vigilance and compassion, so that no more lives are lost behind two faces hiding one terrible truth.